So you're studying engineering, you're wanting to learn electronics. So what problem are you trying to solve? What problem are you trying to solve? So on this channel, as with other channels that have to do with engineering or electronics, we cover a lot of technical things, a lot of technical facets of the discipline. But sometimes, as I've said in other videos, you can hear me say this in other videos constantly, I don't want to spoon feed you guys. I don't want to spoon feed you guys. That is not an attempt to sound condescending or to sound like, I'm up here, you're down there, or something like that. No, it's not like a hierarchical thing or anything like that. The point of that, when I say I don't want to spoon feed you guys, part of what I'm saying there is that the technical knowledge is out there. It's already been figured out. You just have to go find the technical knowledge. Some people have this really confused when it comes to engineering, and I don't know why, but people think that engineering has to do with a lot of this about information or memorizing information. Of course, we want to understand these things, like when we talk about schematics and this and that, but that stuff has already been figured out. If you want to engineer, you want to solve problems. You should want to solve problems. You should have a problem in your mind. So let's say if you're wanting to study engineering, this just kind of gives you a glimpse of what I've talked about in previous videos. When I said part of my PhD thesis and research is part of it is dedicated to partly it's a scrutinization of engineering education. And part of one of my critiques about engineering education is that it's not approached in a way that's predicated on problem solving. It's predicated on a lot of theoretical interplay, let's say, right? Just working out problems that have already been worked out, trying to understand things that have already been understood. And of course, we need to know that stuff and have some experience with it. But the thing is, for the engineering student, I think it's rare that they ever ask themselves, what problem am I trying to solve? You're trying to learn this to help you do something in the world. Hopefully whatever you do helps other people accomplish something. In one of my last videos, there was a gentleman that I had a back and forth with that told me a story about how appreciative he was of the engineers that engineered his prosthesis. He has, I don't know if it's a prosthetic, maybe it's a prosthetic limb that he has, okay? And I think he was an engineer himself also. I think that might have inspired him in some ways to get into engineering. And that story is telling of the purpose of what engineering is about. Someone has an issue, you can come up with some kind of technical or scientific resolution to it. If it's a product, you can produce it, or if it's just an idea, something. If it's something knowledge based, and you create the knowledge to understand something, to be able to do something. Okay, that's engineering. Engineering is not, and this is it might be a kind of crude example because we are going to review this book. This is actually one of the most prominent books in electronics, like circuit books, right? So this is like a library of circuits, 1,001 circuits, practical electronic circuits. Some of it might be outdated, but we're going to go through this. Shameless plug about what we're going to go through. See, again, right? In between this, right? Because it's not either or, it's both and. Okay, this is important, but we have to think about the problems that we want to solve. Unique problems. These are all the problems that have already been solved. When you're looking into a book, especially a technical book, it's showing you things that people have already figured out. I have another book here. This is a book I actually got recently from a YouTuber actually. He's a math tutor and he studied math and physics. He's a graduate in math and physics, and he publishes these books having to do with math and physics. This is a whole series. It goes all the way from college algebra all the way up to differential equations. It's pretty cool, and I always thought that a book like this should exist, so I bought one of his copies, and it has basically all the formulas for the most typical stuff that you see in those disciplines. Okay, so pretty cool idea. I like it. But again, what is he showing you in this book? He's showing you things that people have already figured out. Okay, and we have to know how to figure this stuff out and understand it. But we also have to have in our minds things that we're trying to solve. So what's the problem that you're trying to solve? Again, all these books. This is why sometimes if you don't see me post a video about a book, as often as I typically do, because I'm actually trying to solve like real world problems that mostly pertain to agriculture engineering, mostly pertain to like my farm and stuff like that. But that's my focus. I'm trying to solve problems. I'm not trying to talk about the theory that I might use to solve the problem, because that stuff doesn't actually matter that much. I'm sorry to say that, and some people might disagree, and hey, that's okay. But growing up doing electronics from the age of like 15, and now being almost 40 years old, I can tell you that stuff only matters up to a point. And it's not that it doesn't matter necessarily, but it's like that's not always the focus. Again, because all that stuff is just the stuff to figure out. It's just the minutia. It's the stuff that we've already gotten figured out. That's the stuff that you look into books or textbooks or a book like that, and you find out how you can do something, how you can find out. Let's say if we're looking for a certain voltage, let's say if you forgot how to do Thevenin's theorem or something, you could look up that. You could have a reference book, and you could find the steps to do Thevenin's theorem if you were trying to find something in a circuit that you couldn't find. Okay, find some kind of piece of data in a circuit that you couldn't find. Okay, that's all stuff that you can look up. You can figure it out. This is also a part of engineering. Again, engineering is it's not about knowing all these. It's not about knowing 1,001 circuits, okay? There are more circuits than that. It's not about knowing 1,001 circuits. It's about understanding the circuits, the pieces to the puzzles, let's say, and how you can make one of your own, or how you can take bits and pieces of those circuits and create something that solves another problem, okay? This is all this is about. It's not so much about just regurgitating information. So if you want to do yourself a favor in your journey and exploration, and not only for your education's sake, it's really for your personal sake, because you'll be more productive. I always said, going back to, I could liken this to music. I've always noticed that some of the best musicians are always the musicians that knew what kind of music they wanted to play. This is like, this is not like, it's not really that hard to figure out. Didn't that seem kind of obvious why that is? So the best musicians are oftentimes the ones that knew what they wanted to play, what genre of music they wanted to play, even before or when they first started playing. And it's like, what's the logic behind there? Well, because they knew what they wanted to play, they set themselves up, meaning they learned specific techniques and specific styles, and specific ways of music to actually to play the kind of music that they wanted to learn. So then the same thing goes for engineering. If you have a goal in mind of, hey, I want to try to solve X problem, okay? Because as much as we have in the world as far as technology, just like, electronics, we still have problems in the world, and a lot of problems in the world aren't necessarily going to be solved by electronics. We have to think about that kind of too, right? This is electronics channel. Yeah, but again, why I say that, this is part of why, someone recently asked me, they said, oh, you're doing your thing in engineering. I said, yeah. They said, oh, are you doing electrical? I said, no. I said, I'm doing agricultural. And it's like, oh, well, they thought, oh, well, that's surprising or whatever. But I'm going for where I see more problems to be solved. You see? Go for where the problems need to be solved, not for where um, I don't know, you're entertained by. Again, if I was entertained, if I want to do something that was, like I was well versed in, I had history, and that was like kind of, something I've done before, then yeah, I go into electrical and I do it that way, and it'd be familiar and okay. But I wouldn't be approaching it from the sense of having a problem in mind that I wanted to solve. There's no problem in electrical engineering that I can think of. I mean, most of the things I even do on my farm or agriculturally, and civil or anything like that, it has nothing to do with infrastructure. Infrastructure has nothing to do with anything electrical. Electrical is not going to really help me in other capacities. So if I don't have a problem and I feel like I'm wanting to solve, this is why I wouldn't do. I've thought about doing like something like a graduate degree in electrical engineering. Again, nothing wrong with doing that. But if you want to do that, you might want to think of what area of interest you have in there that where you want to find a problem that needed to be solved. We have to start thinking about having a directed sort of learning. Again, as I said with the musicians that have a directed sense of what they want to learn end out better in the long run. You'll end out better in the long run, and your education will be more purposeful if you have a goal in mind, if you have a problem in mind that you want to solve, because then you can tailor your education towards that problem, and you can proactively pursue that problem while you're being educated. Again, this is one of my critiques of the education system having to do with engineering, is that it's not directed towards problem solving, it's directed towards like a generalist, let's review these topics kind of thing. And the thing is, and someone might rebut and say, oh, well, you have to have the knowledge first, which you don't necessarily need to. One of the things, I'll give you an example. When I was teaching, one of the things I did in my physics class was I had my class figure out how to build a bookshelf. But when you could say, well, that's like more construction or something. That's DIY. That's not like physics. What's physics about that? Well, of course, physics gets into engineering, and with engineering, you get into assembly and processes, and you get into, like cost and efficiency. So there were parameters they had with this bookshelf. So it had to be so many odd feet tall. It had to hold so many books, right? So it had to, it was like 101 books or something like that. It had to be a certain width, and it had to be made at a certain price point. So I put some constraints on the product, which was the bookshelf, which is an everyday common thing that people every day, you might go to Home Depot to buy wood for, right? But they might not be thinking about it in the terms of these constraints. So I put these constraints on it. I put cost constraints, size constraints, even constraints having to do with how many books could be held on the shelf to make it into an engineering problem. Okay? That is the more of a directed, and they did that with not having a bachelor's degree or a master's or something like that, without going into, I don't know, the universal constants or something like that. Wasn't important in that situation, not applicable. Okay? So you don't have to necessarily have a bunch of theoretical knowledge to be able to approach engineering problems. You just have to have the direction. You have to have the really the approach. It's just changing your approach is the idea. So again, as much as I want this channel to be, and as much as this channel is about technical ins and outs of circuitry and what have you, I do want to chime in here and then and now to remind us that the real strength in what you're doing and what you could do is in the problems that you're trying to solve. And if you don't have any problems yet that you're trying to solve, you just think about a problem to solve, because it'll make your work more interesting, it'll make it more fulfilling, it'll be more directed, and you will achieve more on the other end of it, rather than just trying to learn about information. Learn the information But just don't be satisfied with learning the information. Figure out something. And if you can't figure something out for yourself that you're wanting to solve, when I say for yourself, I don't mean that it's actually for yourself, but something that you find a problem that you can think of right off the bat, look out into the world. Look out into the world and think of problems that we have in society, or things that you think might become problems later on in society, and think about how you could use electronics to figure out that problem, to solve that problem, or any other sort of engineering. I just wanted to chime in and say that real quick. I got to go do some chores here on the farm before the sun goes down. I hope you guys have a good one. I'm going to be reviewing Stan Gibilisco's Transistor chapter really soon. The reason why I'm kind of backed up on that is because I actually don't like his chapter that much. It's not as extensive as I want it to be. I don't feel like he focuses on so much of the stuff that we need in a practical sense. So I've been coming up with different ways to present that to you guys, and I think I have just what I want to do now. So I figured that out. So I'll be coming with you guys soon with a little explanation on, we're going to do PNP, or we're going to do NPN transistors first, and then we'll talk about PNP after that. I'll make a follow-up video about PNP. We'll do that separately so that their videos don't run too long and all that. But I'll see you guys soon. Have a good one.